Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una, wa anfa'na bima tu'allimuna, wa zidna bi fadlika ilman wa ta'liman, innaka ala kulli shayin qadir. So we're talking about the wujub, and we mentioned that we don't actually agree that the amr yufid al-wujub. We don't actually agree on that. So when you say, well, amr lil-wujub, that's what we normally hear, right? So if we say the al-amr is for wujub, then if we see an amr that is for nadb, then that's majaz, right? We've already spoken about majaz. If we say that the amr that is for nadb and we see it's for wujub, then we're going to say, oh, look, we have majaz, right? Whenever there's an amr that is for wujub, aqim as-salah is majaz, right? And whenever we say it's al-qadar mushtarak, then we're going to say, then it's not majaz, right? So if I say, for example, Farid is European, that is true, right? Because Europe is al-qadar al-mushtarak between anybody whose origins are from Europe, right? As opposed to I refer to an Irish person. So there's one person from Northern Ireland, which is part of England, part of Britain, and there's one person from Ireland, which is not part of Great Britain. So when I say, oh, they're both British, right? That's majaz, right? Because they're not, right? Does that make sense? So that's one of the reasons why the argument to say al-qadr mushtarak is nice, because then you don't have to deal with majaz necessarily, right? But then you now need, if you say it's al-qadr mushtarak, you say, well, how do I know specifically it's for wujub then? You need a dalil now. Okay, does that make sense? So we're trying to put in our default settings, right? I don't think it's fundamentally going to have a change in terms of what our ijtihad is, but it is going to change the process. Does that make sense? Okay. Everyone's following?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, Sheikh.
Okay, it says وصيغته أي صيغة الأمر الدالة عليه افعل. This is what we mean, right? وليس المراد بهذا الوزن بخصوصه بل كون اللفظ الدال على أمر بهيئته نحو اضرب وأكرم واستخرج ولينفق وليقضوا تفثهم وليوفوا نذورهم وليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق. So the point is the pattern, the أمر. وهي أي صيغة الأمر عند الإطلاق وتجرد عن القرينة الصارفة, right, تحمل عليه أي الوجوب, right, إلا ما دل دليل على أن المراد منه الندب, right, دل دليل, i.e. this is why do we have to talk about majaz and what's it called, majaz and everything before we talk about this, because the qarina, this is part of the process of majaz. So if we remind ourselves with majaz, you're gonna have your word, okay? You're gonna have the madlul of that word, the ma'na, okay? So you have a word, you're gonna have its meaning. Then you're gonna have another meaning. Okay, so majaz is not between words, majaz is between meanings. Okay, so I have my word, I have my meaning, I have my new meaning. Okay, and then I have two things, something that's pushing the new meaning, the old meaning away from the word, and something that's pulling it towards another meaning. So I say, what was it? Look at these two Irishmen, right? Look at these two Irishmen. One is from Northern Ireland, which is actually Britain, and the other one is actually Irish. So they're not really two Irishmen. Okay? So first of all, I say, what is my qarina? How did you know they're not both Irish? The default say Irish, that means you're from Ireland. Doesn't mean you're from Northern Ireland. That's by default. If you had a line in an airport, Irish people line up here, British people line up here. If you're from Ireland, you line up in Ireland. If you're from Northern Ireland, you line up with the British people, with British passport and everything, right? So that's what it means. A British person means this place, Irish means that. So now I say, look at these two Irishmen, but one of them is from Northern Ireland, and one of them is actually Irish. What is the qarina? What is the qarina? The qarina is, for example, I know who he is. I know that he's not actually like that. Right? I've seen his passport. That's a qarina. Right? So the qarina is that information that pushes you away from the default. You have to have a qarina. And then you have to what's called a jami' or an alaqa or a munasaba. These are these three terms that we use, right? We use the word jami' when we're talking about isti'ara. We use the word munasaba when we're talking about majaz aqli. We use the word alaqa when we're talking about majaz mursal, right? But the point is there has to be a relationship. So classic mistake. The person you are in poetry or reading a religious text and you see an alaqa or a munasaba or a jami', but there's no qarina. That's an invalid claim of majaz. Okay, so let's go back to Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi debating with Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas says, "Awla mastum nisa" means jama', means intercourse. Okay, is there a jami'? Is there an alaqa between lamps and intercourse? Yes, there is. Fantastic. Not a problem. There is a relationship. Imam Shafi'i says, but where's your qarina? Where's the information that tells us that it doesn't mean touching? You need to have evidence that it doesn't mean touching. So you can use a verse of the Quran or a hadith or something like that, or some kind of reason. It does not have to be yaqeen. It can just be dhann, right? There's some evidence that's dhanni, but the point is there has to be something pushing it away. Okay, so Imam Shafi'i is his debate here with Ibn Abbas is not about lamps. It is about the process of claiming majaz. Does that make sense? The process of claiming majaz. So here's a hadith and it says you have to do this or do this. The default, the asl, is that it's wujub. So everybody who is claiming that it's not wajib now has to come and say, what's your qarina? The qarina that is not al-qarina as-sarifa an al-wujub kada. Does it make sense? You now have to bring some kind of evidence. Does it make sense?
Yes, sure.
So now I come and talk about evolution. And I say, listen, what does Adam mean in Hebrew? Right? We all know that Islam is basically based on Christianity. Christianity is based on Hebrew, on the Hebrew Bible. So it's all kind of like everyone's just taking from each other, right? So Adam in Hebrew means a man, for crying out loud, right? It means a man. Okay? The ancient Hebrew Jewish people, they were trying to explain the beginning of the world. Okay? Using various different metaphors and artistic ways of explaining things. Okay? They're not talking about people coming from heaven and landing on earth. They're not talking about actual humans. They're talking about the idea of beginning of man. They're trying to express it as an allegory. Look at the connection, Adam and Eve, right? And the connection between human evolution, right? So Adam, there's a connection between Adam, the first human, and evolution, the evolution of humans. Okay? Adam means a human, right? It means a man. So what it means is how did a man, meaning mankind, develop? That's what it means. Right? That's what it means. So what have I proven? Right? What have I proven? That there is an alaqa, that there is a jami', there's a munasaba. Okay? That's what you've proven. You haven't proven that there's a qarina. You have to say it can't mean Adam, alayhi salam, meaning a human being who's created ex nihilo, who's created from nothing, because X. You didn't do that. You just found a munasaba. Does that make sense? So this is a classic game that they'll do in literature. You're reading the novel and say, oh, this play is actually about homosexuality. It's like, how is it about homosexuality? Oh, because look, see the connection? So finding a connection is not sufficient. You need to find your qarina. Does it make sense?
Yes, sure.
Right? Watini wa zaytun. Ah, waturi sinin. Ah, see the connection? Waturi? Watini? Teen is a fig. Fig is in where? Figs are in the Levant. Ah, Christianity. والتين والزيتون. Okay, that's also in the Levant. So Christianity. وطور سينين, Mount Sinai. Musa alayhi salam. Judaism. وهذا البلد الأمين, Mecca. Islam. I swear by Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So you found a munasaba, you found an alaqa, you found a jami', but you didn't find a qarina. So that's an invalid process. Why is it an invalid process? Because if it is a linguistic necessity, forget religion, it is a linguistic necessity that when I say one, you, the receiving end, AI, the computer, the listener, understands one means one. It doesn't mean two. And that yes doesn't mean no. And that cat doesn't mean dog. Because if cat doesn't mean cat by default, no words have any meanings. And the whole process of communication doesn't work. So there's no problem that a word be used 85% of the time metaphorically. No problem, right? Not a problem. 99% of the time. Think of a swear word, right? Here we go. Think of a swear word. Is it actually being used literally? It's not. 99% of the time it's not being used literally, right? That's not a problem. It still has a meaning though. So the fact that it's used 99% of the time to mean something else, it still has a meaning. It's just there's a qarina, right? There's a qarina, there's something, yeah, but you don't mean it here because of this. You don't mean this because of this. But to assume that a word doesn't mean what it usually means, or that al-amr la yufid al-wujub, right? For no reason, is an invalid way of processing language. And so being a literalist, oh, you're a literalist, is a linguistic necessity. We are literalists, right? That's the default. X means X by default. It is not a problem that it doesn't actually, right, mean that half of the time. It's not a problem. But it is a problem to interpret things for no reason. Okay, does that make sense? Should pretty make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a really important thing. جامع slash مناسبة slash قرينة عفوا جامع slash مناسبة slash علاقة, check. But I need to also to find a قرينة. If there's no قرينة, you assume the word means what it means. Right? So you said, hey, are you happy that your child is going to university? And you're crying and you say yes. Well, I can tell the fact you're crying that it's kind of like yes-ish, you know? He's leaving home and da 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 da, right? You know? Right. Someone sarcastic, right? How are you doing today? Fantastic. Thank you. How are you? It's like, whoa, okay, I'm sorry, right? So the way he said it, you know that he didn't mean fantastic, right? That's a qarina, right? It could be a qarina of the hal, the situation. It could be a qarina of the aql. It could be a qarina lafdiyya, a word that was used, right? But the point is it has to have a qarina. It is not sufficient to assume something that doesn't mean what it means, unless you have a qarina. لما دل الدليل على أن المراد منه الندب. So when you say دليل, you don't need to have a دليل قطعي, right? But you need to have something there. And if you didn't do that, then you have chaos. So this is the problem with what's it called? Deconstructivism, right? So deconstructivism, what's his name? Deconstruction is called. Deconstruction. Where is it?
Sheikh,
Yes, go ahead.
where do we draw the line between being literalist and being not too extreme literalist?
So when somebody is named as when you label somebody as literalist, what you mean is they are not willing to ever interpret anything, even if there's a qarina, right? Even if there's a qarina, you're not going to do it. So he said, that person has a problem. So that person also does not understand how language works. So when I say, for example, what time is it? What time is it right now? She put him in where you're in Austria, right? What time is it
Yes,
now?
10:32.
10:32. And how many seconds?
I don't know. A few.
Exactly. So it's not 10:32, right? And had you
Yeah.
asked me, I would have said it was 10:30. It's not 10:30, nor is it 10:32. And even if you gave me the seconds, that's not even accurate because the milliseconds. So we speak من باب يعني تقريبا, right? That's how we use language. We use language in we actually, one of the scholars, I think Ibn Jinni said that. He said, if you look at language, most of language is majaz, actually. Most of language is actually majaz. You know? She said, "Oh, I boarded the plane." What do you mean you boarded the plane? Like you went inside the plane or the whole plane. Like even he says like this, what is it? He says when you say قمت, he says إذا قال something, he says something like this. He says من إذا قلت قمت فهذا مجاز فإنما فعلت بعض القيام, right? So I say the following sentence. I say I stood. What does it mean to stand? Oh, it means to do the action called standing. Okay, the action called standing. You mean the abstract standing? Did you do that? Say no. You mean all standing, like you did everyone's act of standing. Say no. Okay, what do you mean then? So you see, even like in a basic sentence, when you say I stood, what you mean is I stood. It wasn't, you're using a word which is universal. That's a kulli, right? It means you undertook all standing or you did the generic standing. Well, what you mean is I stood in a particular way in a particular time at a particular place. But you don't speak like that because that's not how we use language.
So we see things as majaz according to the urf.
Yeah,
Like,
we use majaz all the time. Approximations. Um, he punched me. Or what do you mean he punched you? Like his fist punched you? What do you mean the skin of the fist punched you? You know? Like, but I say
yeah.
he punched me, but you don't mean his whole body, nor do you his soul that his soul punched you. Like we don't speak like that. We are actually, you say, the oxygen reacts. What do you mean reacts? What, like it decided to do something? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, so the way we use language, the way we look at things is we manipulate things and put language together and we make kind of like fake stories basically about everything. But if somebody was to be literal, like take things apart literally, you could hardly say anything. You could hardly say anything. I opened the door. What, you opened the door up? Or do you mean you moved the door? So yeah, that's what I mean. When I say I opened the door, I didn't open the door up, did I? I opened the door, meaning I turned the handle and I moved the door. What, you moved the whole door, like to another place? No. Okay, what do you mean then? Well, I moved this part of the door and I left that part of the door still. What, you didn't move on its hinge? Like, oh my God, you know, right? Have you heard that story? How old are you?
No, I
It's
didn't.
like a Jordan Peterson.
It, I don't know Jordan Peterson, um, alhamdulillah, I don't know who he is. Well, I
He's
think
a
I've
he's
heard
a
of him,
philosopher.
but he's a who? Sorry.
Philosopher. He's a bit strange. He was
Okay.
asked Muhammad Hijab, how do we feel? I think some basic question. He said like, what do you mean by how? What do you mean by do? What do you mean by you? So like a bit extreme, but yeah.
Yeah.
He
So
asked him,
so so sometimes these are useful questions, but other times they're not. Like imagine, for example, you're sitting there with Aristotle or Plato, and you have this discussion, and then class ends. So they, hey, yeah, Aristotle, you hungry? You want to grab some? You want to get what's it called? Shawarma in Berlin? And he's like, what's the shawarma? He's not asking for the haqiqa, right? He's just asking like, what's it like? You know? But when you actually start talking as a normal human being, right? You will be using majaz all the time. You'll be using majaz all the time. Even when I say all the time, I mean a lot of the time. Right? A lot of the time. Like, that's how we speak. We speak in approximations. We connect things, right? If you speak to somebody with autism, it can get kind of confusing, right? Because they don't see things the way that other people see things. So other people are doing approximations, like I know one kid with autism. Like you have to tell him the exact time. Otherwise, he'd get very, very upset. Like there is a big difference for him between 10:30 and 10:37. So for me, it's like, what time is it? It's 10:40. Okay, but it's not 10:40. It's in 3 minutes. I know.
I think I have autism.
Okay. No, but it's how it's a lot of people in this generation, well, because you're using iPhones all the time, you're using, Uber, stuff like that. So people kind of talk like that. But like approximately, how old am I? Nearly 40. What do you mean nearly 40? How close? You know? Where do you live in Malaysia? What, you live in the whole of Malaysia? So no, I live in Kuala Lumpur. What, you live inside the city? Like you got the whole city. You made it into a thing that can fit your body in it, and you live inside it. No. Okay, so what do you mean then? Oh, I live on a certain geographical point of Kuala Lumpur. Is that okay now? I say, yeah. Well, you live on it. Like you live. That's the food that you live off. Like, oh my God, right? So the way that we speak is not like that. The way that we speak in German, how do you say? Do you say I'm on the street or in the street?
On the street.
I'm on the street. So you're on the whole street.
No, of course
You're on a
not.
part of the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like,
So why do you say that? You should say I'm standing on a particular part of the street that's enough for my feet to stand on,
yeah, that's true.
right? In Arabic, you say ana fi shari'. I'm in the street, right? And then Sharif says, how how are you doing? So I am fine. Oh, do you mean you are, or do you mean you're existentiated? Like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, so, do you exist or are you brought into existence? Like, I don't know. Do I exist? Right? So the same thing, the way that we speak, the way that Quran speaks, the way the Prophet speaks, Revelation uses normal language. There's a lot of metaphor. There's a lot of metaphor, but that doesn't mean that words don't have meanings. When you say makrul layli, for example, the plotting of the night, the default is that you're saying the night plotted. Makrul layli, right? The default is when you say makrul layli, the plotting of the night. That's what you mean. And I come along and say, hey, but can the night plot and plan and scheme? No. Oh, the qarina then is a night doesn't do that. So what it really means is rather the plotting during the night that you did and other people did. Okay. But there is a default meaning, right? Words do mean things, right? So here's the problem. Either you say words don't mean anything because everything's metaphorical, right? Or I don't believe in metaphor ever. Or metaphor is analogous with kadhib, with lying, right? So what's the difference between lying and metaphor?
That I want to hide the truth.
Right, because you're not
Intent.
giving it, or a joke, for example, right? So for example, like a really, really bad joke, okay? So I bring you to America, okay? Let's pause this for a second. Not that's going to save me, right? Um, um, what I was going to say is, for on the receiving end, Mizan says something, okay? And he says, I am sick today. Is it valid for me to assume he means sick, meaning cool?
According to the Urf, no, wouldn't
No,
be.
no, that's not the orf, right? Right. My kids, I taught my kids that. They're like, oh yeah, daddy, they got the skate park. Like, oh yeah, daddy, I saw a sick, this, like, these are terms that I grew up with. Like, oh, that's, the sick kickflip. That was a sick, thing, whatever, right? So sick meaning cool. Okay. But that's not the norm. So now I don't have a context. There's no orf, there's no thing. He just says, Mizan says, I am sick today. He doesn't mean I am cool today. He doesn't mean that. Okay. Whereas I am cool, do we usually mean cool as in cold, or do we usually mean cool as in fashionable or whatever it is, right? That guy's really cool. It doesn't mean that he's cold. That guy's really cool. That means he's impressive, right? Because that's the orf. That's the normal sense. So there's a qarina, or there's not even a qarina, is that in this speaking context, in this muhataba, That's haqiqah, right? Cool doesn't mean cold. It means impressive, fashionable, something like that. Oh, makes sense? So
Yeah, Sheikh.
go ahead, Bismillah.
So why did like scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah say that there is no basically majaz in the Quran?
I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. Because the thing is, now you're gonna ask him, say, Ihdina as-sirata mustaqim, what's that? It's not majaz.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So basically, honestly, I think there's certain people, they just have certain minds, they don't understand certain things. They don't intend to say crazy things, but they just don't understand what they're saying. And I've heard one sheikh say that about Ibn Taymiyyah, that his ilm was greater than his aql. Like he actually, you know, like Imam Ghazali is the opposite.
I
Imam
think it
Ghazali,
was.
yeah, go ahead.
I think it was Isuka or someone else who said this.
Allahu A'lam, right?
I'm sure.
So it's like, you don't have enough processing power. So people are like that, People will say things and it's kind of like surprising sometimes. You don't know why certain people say certain things. Allahu A'lam. But anyway, it's because you're making it synonymous with kadhib, right? There's no majaz in the Quran because it's not haqiqah, but that's not right. But now let's take another example. وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Okay? وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So I say Allah's kursi. What has Allah given me? I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a jism, right? He's not a body. He doesn't sit on things. So could something that doesn't have a body and doesn't sit, could he have a throne? Yeah. So is it possible that Allah has a throne? So yeah. So وَسِعَ كُرْسِيهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ خلاص. It means his throne, he has a throne, and it is bigger than the heavens and the earth. There we go. So there is a tafsir, right, of others that say no, وَسِعَ عِلْمُهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Right? Because what does it say before it? Right? يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء colon وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض أي وسع علمه السماوات والأرض. Right? So it's saying he knows everything. They don't know everything. His throne, i.e. his knowledge, includes everything. Right? That's a tafsir. Right? But where's the qarina? You know what I'm saying? So the qarina for some would be, oh, he just mentioned knowledge just before it. That's a qarina for them. Maybe, maybe not. But the default, you say no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a throne and that's it. And it's come in the Sahih Hadith and Ibn Hibban and other places and khalas. What do you want? Now, in reality, could it actually be that there's no throne? Yeah, why not? But, that's not, we don't have the ability to do that because we don't have that information. Just like I assumed that Mizan said sick meaning cool, that's not valid because it's not, you can't do that. Or when, you asked me what time is it? It was, so right now, for example, I say, oh, it's quarter to 11. Okay, it's quarter to 11, right? So 10:47 is quarter to 11, right? If you ask me, I would not say 10:47. That'd be annoying, right? I'm not in the military. It's quarter to 11, right? Um, um, but or 10:50, So, but now if I said 10:50, can you assume that it means 5:47? Is that valid? So I might use metaphor and not give you the qarina or the alaqa. How do you as the listener have to assume it to be? It means what it means. He said it is 5:40. That means it's 5. If it's 5, if you said it's 10 to 11, that means it's 5:50 and 0 seconds. That's what it means. You can't say and 5 seconds or 5 seconds before, 5 seconds later. You can't do that. Even though I might be speaking in approximate terms. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So there's one as the listener, processing majaz as a listener, you have to take everything in haqiqah. The default is that, right? But that's the default, right? It's not a valid way to do things, right? To do things in another way, right? But for the speaker, we do that all the time. It's very normal. Okay. خير. وكاتبوه إن علمتم فيهم خيرا. So you ask Ibn Taymiyyah, is that majaz or not? Right? So, or أقيموا الصلاة. Right? أقيموا الصلاة. Make the prayer stand up. How do you make the prayer stand up? That's majaz. So أقيموا is majaz because it says make the prayer stand up. And as-salah is majaz because it means the prayer in general. I can't make the prayer in general stand up. I can only do with specific prayers. I can't make the generic. I can't actually do anything to the generic prayer. So the whole thing is majaz. What it means is pray certain prayers in a proper way. The prayers that you can do while you're mukallaf and you're able to do them. That's what it means. But we don't speak like that. So aqimu is majaz and salah is majaz. Right? Does it make sense?
Yes,
وَكَاتِبُوهُمْ إِنْ عَلِمْتُمْ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا. So majority of scholars say the mukataba contract with a slave is recommended, or it's not even recommended. In fact, the Shafis we call it. We don't call it we don't even call it mustahab. We call it what's the term? Forget the term. It's an it's called. Basically, it's a worldly recommendation. So something that's mustahab, there is a reward for doing it. Whereas this is not, this, I can't remember the word now. This is called something else, where it's just a worldly recommendation. So, i.e., if you think there is financial profit in doing a mukataba contract with your slave, go ahead and do it. That's what it means. In alimtum fihi khayra, meaning money. If there's money in it, right? If there's money, go ahead. Yeah. If you think you're going to make more money out of your slave by selling him, go ahead. So it's not for wujub. And nor is it even for nadab. Right? They call it irshad. That's the word. Irshad. Irshad is a worldly advice. Right? Go ahead. أو الإباحة نحو إذا حللتم فاصطادوا. Right? But the asl is فاصطادوا is for wujub. فإن الاصطياد أحد وجوه التكسب وهو مباح وقد أجمعوا على عدم وجوب المكاتبة والاصطياد. Right. وظاهر كلامه أن الاستثناء في قوله إلا ما دل دليل منقطع لأن الدليل هو القرينة ويمكن يكون متصلا وتختص القرينة بما كان متصلا بالصيغة والدليل بما كان منفصلا عنه لأن ما كانت القرينة فيه منفصلة داخل في المجرد عن القرينة. Right. Okay. ومثال القرينة المتصلة فالآن باشروهن وحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم. ومثال قرينة منفصلة وأشهدوا إذا تبايعتم. والقرينة أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم باع ولم يشهد. Right? So this basically, there's a qarina that's part of the sentence and a qarina that's not part of the sentence I was talking about. Right? Right? وأحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث. Rafath means to talk about foul things, to talk about rude things. What it means is intercourse. فالآن باشروهن, well, you can now touch their skin. What it means you can now sleep with them. Right? فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب. Okay, ومثال okay. ولا تقضي ولا تقتضي. There's a tab that's dropped. I'm not sure what happened here. ولا تقتضي صيغة الأمر العارية المتجردة عما يدل على التقييد بالتكرار أو بالمرة التكرار على الصحيح. Right? So when you say pray, that means pray once. When you say worship Allah, that means worship Allah once. Okay? إلا ما دل الدليل على قصد التكرار. For example, كالأمر الصلوات الخمس وصوم رمضان. So now the illah for the wujub of Ramadan is the new Ramadan. The illah for the wujub of the next prayer is that prayer. Right? So the fact that the Fajr comes up again, you pray Fajr again. Right? But otherwise, لا يفيد التكرار. ومقابل الصحيح أنه يقتضي التكرار فيستوعب المأمور بالفعل المطلوب ما يمكنه من عمره حيث لا بيان لأمر المأمور به لانتفاء مرجح بعضه على بعض وقيل يقتضي المرة وقيل بالتوقف. So the issue is يقتضي المرة is you're saying that, for example, if I told you pay zakat, it means pay zakat once and not twice. And then now I need other evidence to say that it doesn't mean twice. Okay? So there's a difference between يقتدي المرة versus لا يقتدي التكرار ولا المرة. Right? It neither indicates repetition, nor does it indicate that I just have to do it once, but rather the what's it called? Doing it once is من مستلزمات من ضروريات إيجاد الماهية. إيجاد الماهية, bringing out the reality of that thing. So I said, go on Hajj. Does that mean go on Hajj again and again every year? Does it mean go once? So it says it doesn't mean go every year, nor does it mean go once. It just means make sure that your going on Hajj actually happens. Does that make sense? So it's not possible to go on Hajj without it happening at least once. But there's a difference between it actually implies once. Okay? If I say eat, I want you to eat al-moz. I want you to eat the category of banana. It's not possible for you to eat the category of banana, right? Something from the category of banana without eating at least one piece of one banana. So it doesn't mean one piece of one banana. But it's not possible for you to do that without the mahiyah, right? If I say in Arabic, for example, I want you to socialize with people. People is ism jins jam'i. It means groups of people. So in Arabic, that'd be at least three people. So if you hung out with one person or two, you wouldn't have done it. It doesn't mean three, though. It means people. So it's not possible to hang out with people unless it's a minimum of three. So there's a difference between indicating three as opposed to the minimum being three, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. So basically, if an amr is repeated, it doesn't mean that it is the wajib needs to be repeated. Just the emphasis that you have to go. For example, Hajj.
Oh, that's different. If I say صلي ثم صلي, حجة ثم حجة, that's something else.
Yeah, I mean like spread out through Quran, for example.
Oh yeah, I see. Good point. From what I remember, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أقيموا الصلاة in one place and أقيموا الصلاة in another place. Or if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أعطي زيدا درهما. And another place of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعطي زيدا درهما. I don't know. Good question. Like, would you have to do it twice? I don't know. I'm not sure. But what we're talking about is when you say أعطي زيدا درهما, that does not mean keep doing it again and again and again. Right? Nor does it mean give it to him once. But it's not possible to give him one dirham without giving him at least one dirham. Or if I said, for example, tasaddaq ala Zayd, right? The only way that you could give charity to him is to give it to him at least once. Otherwise, how is it possible that you've done it if you didn't even do it once? But there's a difference between there's a difference between tasaddaq ala Zaydin versus tasaddaq ala Zaydin marratan wahidatan. Right? They're not the same. Okay? So he says, وقيل اقتل المرة. That's just wrong. وقيل بالوقف. You're not sure, you have to stop. واتفق القائلون بأنه لا يقتضي التكرار على أنه إذا علق على علة محققة نحو إذا زنى فاجلدوه أنه يقتضي التكرار. Right? Obviously, because it's now because of the Allah. So this issue of takrar is not particularly relevant because If you said it was takrar, you would say it means takrar unless there's some other evidence. And if you said it doesn't have takrar, then you would say it doesn't let you feed a takrar unless there's evidence. And everybody has evidence. So it's not particularly practical. So he says, wala. And in reality, where does this idea of takrar come from? It comes from the flip side. What's the opposite of a command?
Prohibition.
Prohibition. So when I say don't lie, is that for takrar? Yes. I am asking you to continually not lie. So that's where the argument would come from. If I say don't lie, that means don't lie now and keep not lying. Okay? And then it says, وَلَا تَقْتَضِي صيغة الأمر مطلق الفور. Right? It does not mean do it immediately. يريد ولا التراخية. Nor does it mean do it later. So when I say give Zayd charity, it doesn't mean give it to him now. Nor does it mean do it later. It just means make sure that happens. إلا بدليل فيهما لأن الغرض إيجاد الفعل من غير اختصاص بالزمن الأول والثاني. وقيل يقتضي الفور. Why? Because it's the opposite of a command. The opposite of a nahi. So if I say don't lie, you say, okay, sure, don't worry about it. I'll start not lying in about 2 years. That means you didn't do it, right? You didn't do it. I said, don't lie. And you said, okay, I'll start not lying in 2 years. You didn't do it. So the flip side of an amr, of a nahi is an amr, so the same thing, right? But that's not correct. وكل من قال بأنها تقتضي التكرار قال إنها تقتضي الفور. The same thing. Okay? So then he says, والأمر بإيجاد الفعل أمر به وبما لا يتم ذلك الفعل إلا به كالأمر بالصلاة فإنه أمر بالطهارة فإن الصلاة لا تصح إلا بالطهارة المؤدية إليها. Right? وإذا okay. So he says, so now we have two different things. Okay. So if I have to pray, do I have to make wudu?
Yes.
Okay. If I have to go on Hajj, do I have to make enough money to go on Hajj?
No.
Yep.
Someone can give you money. So you don't have to work, actually.
So you don't have to work.
I mean, if someone gives you the money and you
Okay.
don't,
So I don't have anybody to give me money and I don't want to work.
then you're only obliged if you have the money.
Okay, very good. Hajj. What about zakat? Do I have to earn the nisab?
No.
No.
If I have the nisab, then I have to pay, right? So we have two things. I'm going to mention it here. قال الرملي وإنما كان الأمر بالفعل أمرا بما لا يتم به إلا به لأنه لو لم يوجب بوجوده لجاز تركه ولو جاز تركه لجاز ترك واجب. Right? So the phrase you're going to say here in a second is ما لا يتم وجود الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. Right? ما لا يتم وجود الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. As opposed to ما لا يتم وجوب الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. Right? So the prayer will not exist without wudu. So therefore you have to make wudu. Okay? Hajj will not be obligatory without money. So therefore you don't need to make money. Zakat will not be obligatory. So فما لا يتم وجود الواجب, the wujud of it, this obligation will not happen, will not exist unless you do this thing that becomes wajib. As opposed to the wujub, ما لا يتم وجوب الواجب إلا به فهو wajib. That's not true. So you do not have to go and make money to pay zakat. You do not have to go and make money to go on Hajj. Right? Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sheikh,
Go ahead.
when it comes to the command of growing a beard,
Mm-hmm.
when it's done once, do we say that the reason why we always have to have a beard is due to the nature of the language used, that the maqsood is to always have a beard.
So the Prophet said, "Ihful liha," make beards big. So now, so the issue is, so now you basically said, okay, the Prophet told me grow your beard big, and I did, and then I shaved it off. So I did it. So we're going to say here that there is a dalil khariji, there's another dalil, external dalil, that it means that it's for takrar, right? That's for takrar. And I don't know what that would be. Use something else, basically. I can't put it in like logical terms, but that's basically the idea. So yes, in principle, so there's a difference between don't shave your beard, right? But it doesn't say that. It says grow your beard. Okay, I did it. I grew my beard and then I shaved it. Khalas, I've done it once. What's wrong with that? Right? And so I think you can have other evidence. Wallahu a'lam. Okay. Then he goes to the next point and it says وإذا فعل بالبناء المفعول الضمير المأمور به يخرج المأمور عن العهدة. You have done what you have been asked to do. So he says وفي بعض النسخ وإذا فعله المأمور يخرج عن العهدة والمعنى أن المكلف إذا أمر بفعل شيء ففعل ذلك الفعل مأمور به كما أمر, right? And that's where we're going to get the whole idea of صحة from. You did it as you were ordered. فإنه يحكم بخروجه عن عهدة ذلك الأمر. You're no longer responsible for that. ويتصف الفعل بالإجزاء. You said you've done it. وهو ذا هو المختار. وقال قوم إنه يحكم بالإجزاء بخطاب متجدد. Something else. Anyway, we don't need to go into that. الذي يدخل في الأمر والنهي وما لا يدخل. Inshallah, we'll come back to this. So I don't think we're gonna have classes in Ramadan, guys. It's not very Ramadani material. It's possible if you want to do it, we can. But maybe you could just mention it. We'll put a poll who wants to do it in Ramadan, who's not. And I may also have other classes at this time. I don't know. So we'll see, inshallah.
I think it would be best to post, inshallah.
Always, inshallah. Inshallah ta'ala.
But do we have class next week? I think so.